Hi guys, MrRoflWaffles here. By following the tips in this video, you're never gonna fail the Astra boss fight or the Easter egg ever again. And that's without even using the cheese, by the way. We're gonna talk about the Frenzied Guard strat in the video, but I've got a different strat that low-key might be even better. And so even if the Frenzied strat is patched, we're still gonna be frying the boss in like 20 seconds using the tech that I've discovered for this vid. And it's not just boss focused. We're gonna go through the entire thing, starting from your loadout and your augments. To begin with, the M34 Nova line is so good, man. It doesn't need many attachments to be crazy good for damage, but it will be improved if you've got a scope that helps with range. And this isn't vital, it's just something that is easier to aim with, and it's gonna help also specifically when you're shooting the towers just before boss fight. I'd also recommend a suppressor for salvage, a Cyclops barrel for more headshot damage, and the rest of your attachments can basically just be focused on accuracy. The nice thing about the Nova line is that it's on the wall in the map by the jug machine, so set it as your zombie build, and then rather than just upgrading a grey rarity weapon and spending a ton of salvage, you can buy it off the wall instead to save some salvage. So if we're not loading in with the Nova line, we are going to instead load in with the M10 Breacher, and it's going to become clear why we're doing this when we get to the boss fight section of the video, but just trust me, this thing is giga strong. It's absolutely unbelievable. Then for attachments, we're going to use the 19.8 inch bull barrel. That's going to give you more magazine ammo capacity and a little bit more damage range. We'll use the Redwell dash hand stop for faster movement speed, which is just always a nice flat bonus to have. The LW skeleton stock for greater movement speed once again, and hipfire movement speed. The 2 milliwatt adaptive tactical laser for tac stance, which is really nice. If you haven't used tac stance in either BO6 or BO7, it's a great addition for weapons like this. And then, maybe controversially, we're going to use the pump guide rod, which gives you faster fire rate and charge time. And I know you might think that a different option would be better here, but I really like using it this way because the Breacher can be a bit fiddly with its charge up, and reducing that charge time, in my opinion, makes a really massive difference. Another weapon, actually, that is also really good is the Kogot SMG, but I've got some other weapon preferences which I'm going to focus on in this video. But we can test the Kogot in another video if you want. Just leave a comment and let me know. For our field upgrade, I'm going to recommend Frenzied Guard for this one. I know a lot of people are in love with Ether Shroud, and I am too, but on this map, Frenzied Guard kind of takes the cake for various reasons. Then for equipment, I think decoys are actually decent here, but they're not essential, and C4 also is not essential, but it is quite nice for some speedrun tech, which we're going to implement in a non-speedrun capacity. Then for Gobblegums, you guys know that I don't goon, so we're just going to go with some blue balls. We're going with Power Keg, Shields Up, and Temporal Gift. And if you really wanted to push that, you could go for a Who's Keeping Score as well. Then focusing on perk augments for a moment here, the Jug Probiotic Augment is fantastic. I'm a big fan of that one. I know that some people are big fans of Turtle Shell for this, so you're welcome to experiment with that at your leisure, but I'm going to recommend Probiotic for the purpose of this video. Then Speed Cola's Supercharged Augment is great for getting your field upgrades faster. Mule Kick has the Kickback Augment, where you get a discount on perks, which can be quite nice if you're attempting to go into the boss at a fairly early round. But if you're planning to go in a slightly later round, then I wouldn't use that augment and I'd just trade it out for something else. And then Wisp Tea has had some augment buffs, so the Mask of Salvation, the Fox, can now revive you and you keep all your perks. So it's essentially like having 3 extra equivalent exchanges, which is really nice. Also, if you're playing solo or if you're in co-op and you or your friend is lazy, then Zombie Sitter is really nice on Wisp Tea as well to hold the last zombie for you. So that's our loadout augments and loadout selection that I would go for. However, I am going to mention some different augments specifically for the boss later in the video. So if you're in a solo game, you can trade out augments mid-match. That's going to be completely fine. Whereas if you're in co-op, you'll probably want to watch this entire video first before you jump into your game to evaluate whether you want to start with some of these spawning in augments or whether you want to go straight for the boss augments. But like I said, those will be shown later. So we've spawned into the match now. What are the first things that we're going to do? Well, Pack-a-Punch obviously has to be activated first. And I do have a quick note on this process because it is a little bit more fiddly than Ashes, which is an absolute cakewalk. And the zombies during the little PAP challenge defense have more health than normal zombies on the round that you're on. So one way to make this absolutely trivial is to just make sure you're using that Frenzied Guard that I recommended, and then midway through the PAP defense, use Frenzied so they all just run to you instead. You obviously got the option of things like decoys, throwing a C4, stuff like that. And as a last-ditch attempt to clear the room if it's getting too overwhelming, you can head outside the PAP room and go towards Mule Kick, and then look up towards this part of the building just here, and shoot here where I'm shooting the gameplay, and that's going to give you a free nuke power-up, which pretty much guarantees that you can clear this defense even if you're out of ammo and you're really struggling. Now, the next thing in the Easter egg is to put Cryo Freeze on your weapon, Pack-a-Punch a gun, and start doing those steps. But did you know there's a way to get free Cryo Freeze without having to spend the salvage? And this also opens you up to potentially being given free mystery perks throughout the entire rest of your game. And to do this, you just need to find the girls. Yes, the girls from Ashes are back in Astra, and I believe the way that you activate the girls is you go over to this cabinet in the museum where you can see these tiny little handprints. You break the glass and hold square on it during a Ravager round. Then the next round and the following 2 rounds after that, so 3 rounds after your Ravager round, one of the cases in the museum will have spooky noises and you need to interact with that. So find those noises, interact with that case, come back the next round, do it again. And then I think you do that 3 times. And then you should have the girls in the map. And when you find the girls, they'll give you a free Cryo Freeze. The good news about this Easter egg also is that the girls come back. And when they come back, they'll give you, I think, 1 more free Cryo Freeze. And then from that point on, you get things like free guns and potentially free perks as well. Now, another thing we need for the Easter egg is obviously Oscar. And I'll give you some Oscar tips in just a moment, but first of all, getting your first Oscar can be a little fiddly sometimes, so here's a way to guarantee you get his spawn and he's right in front of you. It's quite simply failing these steam vents. As soon as you fail that step, you just need to shoot 1 steam vent and wait, basically. Oscar will teleport to you, and you can then do with him whatever you desire. And if you've just failed the steam vents, you can either re-interact with the organ to start the steam again, and then just finish the steam vents and do the sun trap, or you could immediately start leading him elsewhere to do one of the other traps if you wanted to. Now, while you're leading him around, some pro tips, Oscar is not going to automatically aggro to you when he spawns in and is just roaming around the map. And you can track his position also, by the way, using the map because he's got a little roaming elite icon on there. So when he's not aggroed, he'll be in sort of search mode and his light will be yellow shining in front of him. And so long as you don't enter his line of sight, he's actually going to stay chill and you can walk behind him and you'll be just fine. This is nice because you actually don't have to kill Oscar with a bullet weapon at any point in the Easter egg. So knowing that you don't really need to aggro him all that frequently means you can really reduce the amount of time that you spend being chased by those red-eyed zombies that are really annoying and fast. Now, while we're on the topic of Cryo Freeze and these Oscar steps, obviously you need the 3 shards, and you're going to get those by putting Cryo on your weapon and then shooting the purple crystals. But something you might not have realized about the purple crystals is that later in your game, especially if you're using the M34 Novaline, you're going to run out of ammo fairly quickly, and it can be fairly costly to just keep buying ammo for the gun over and over. But if you're using Death Perception with the Treasure Hunter augment, every time you destroy a crystal, it will drop ammo for you. And this just helps your general points economy, and it's going to mean that you'll have to buy ammo less times before going into boss, which might mean that you can get an extra Pack-a-Punch level or something like that if you're trying to go in at a low round. Now, another one of these steps you need for Oscar is the battery from Tessie, and there's been so much misinformation about this step, it's actually crazy. I've had people swear adamantly in my chat that you have to shoot Mr. Peaks' gear stick, and that's the only trigger. It's just got a buggy hitbox and stuff like that. And other people say, yeah, melee the truck, that's the best way to do this. And these methods do work, but they aren't the actual way the step works. Like, I think we need to be careful about spreading that misinfo here. Because if you're far away from Tessie, like you're upstairs in the spawn, for example, and you spray into the hood will not consistently open. But once you get closer and you shoot the hood, the battery flies out. I've also tested it shooting Tessie's ass. I've shot her in the back right cheek, and the battery still pops out the front of the car. So you do have options here. You don't just have to do it in one specific way. And that means that you can shoot or melee with your papped gun on the truck, and it should still work for you. So once you've got that, and you've got your wire, and you've got your UFO, you're going to be able to just tunnel vision on getting the rest of your Oscar trap kills. And I've seen a lot of people actually struggling with doing these steps the right way. First of all, sometimes making him follow you is kind of annoying. And the main thing you got to worry about there is the red UFOs he shoots. For this, just bob and weave, hide behind cover. You can always hear him charging up a UFO to fire, so you can use that to dodge. But let's say you're doing the sun or pack-a-punch step here. One thing that some people mess up is they bring Oscar through the laser beam, but he just walks straight through it, and then he doesn't actually explode. So the most optimal way to do this is to have him walk into the laser and then run past him so he turns around and keeps standing in the beam for a second, and that will guarantee that you get the kill. Also, when you're aligning that sun telescope, there's actually a trick to make it go a little faster, and I've got one for console and for PC here. So on console, rather than just using one stick to move the cursor, if you use both of your analog sticks, it actually doubles the speed of the cursor and means you can get to the sun faster. Then on PC, you can use WASD to move the telescope, or you can use the mouse to move it, but you can actually use both at the same time to make it move even faster, just like you were using two analog sticks. So that's the sun trap. The rocket trap is even easier than you might realize. First thing to mention is you do have to get your shards again from 3 more crystals if you fail the step, but you're about to never fail this step again, so that's not a problem. And then the second thing here is you don't need to keep Oscar confined to the back of the rocket for the whole countdown. So that means you don't have to sort of uncomfortably try to run circles behind it and end up going down while you do that. You just need to make sure that by the time the countdown is about to hit 1 and then ignition/liftoff, you at that stage have Oscar behind the rocket. So you can have him just next to that sort of area beforehand if you want to, but make sure that as that timer ends, you then bring him into the exhaust and the step will succeed. Next, the laser trap. I think this is the one that most people have the most trouble with, and the way I've been able to consistently get this done is actually to completely ignore Oscar, and instead to just keep running circles around the trap while I'm doing the step. And when doing this, Oscar will be in close proximity to the trap, and as long as he's next to it when the charging sequence finishes, you should successfully complete the step. Now, once all of those are done, you've got to do the victim audio, right? You need your code for the machine in the pack-a-punch room. But first of all, you might not have been aware, you can't get that victim audio to play until you've gotten the wonder weapon. So there's no point listening out for victim audio prior. But then once you've got the wonder weapon, you don't actually have to follow him to get the order of the planets. And what I mean by this is when Oscar spawns in for the first time after getting the wonder weapon, if you start a timer on your phone, you can just ignore Oscar for about the first minute and 30 seconds of him being in the map. Then, first of all, make sure your subtitles are turned on because it's going to make this so much easier. And then aim to get behind Oscar by the 1 minute and 40 seconds mark. And it's between then and the sort of 2 minutes and 5 seconds mark that Oscar is going to play the Dr. Thurston audio that you're looking for. This is the same every game. For that first Oscar spawn, you're always going to get that audio about 1 minute 40 into his fresh spawn. But if you mess this up somehow and you've then got other audio playing and you're waiting for it to cycle back, you'll hear the Dr. Thurston audio after first the 7th and then the 12th victims. So if you bump into Oscar and you hear him doing victim 7, then that means that you've got a little bit more time to wait because he needs to cycle through victim 12, and then he'll start the 20th victim audio, which is always the Dr. Thurston audio. Next, defending the brain can be a pretty overwhelming task if you do this wrong, but it's actually incredibly easy if you do this the right way. So first of all, just like Pack-a-Punch, you can activate your Frenzied Guard to pull all the zombies off the brain, making the step completely trivial. Second, decoys, Casimirs, monkeys, those are all great to throw down to distract the zombies. And while you've thrown one of those, you can also run through the laser trap room and to the left of the arsenal machine here, and look where I'm looking and copy what I'm doing for a free max ammo. which will refresh your special grenades so you can throw more Casimirs, and again, that makes the step super trivial. On top of that, if you've got one teammate holding a zombie elsewhere on the map, and then you are the one that activates the lockdown, currently with the way the game works, all the zombies are going to come from one window for some reason. I don't know why it's like this, but they all flow from one point, which makes it really, really easy to defend. But this is something that Treyarch might patch potentially in the future, sadly. And finally, since we're already using Cryo Freeze for the Easter egg steps here, if you're using the Ice Cloud Major Augment and the Liquid Nitrogen Minor Augment, that's going to make the defense so easy, because you'll proc Cryo on basically all the zombies, and then there'll be a small chance that the frozen zombie makes an Ice Cloud to slow every other zombie. So as you can imagine, in combination with everything we said about Frenzied Guard and your Casimirs, this step is no longer going to cause you any problems. Now, for the bust step that's coming up shortly here, if you haven't used my Easter egg guide and followed my tutorial in there, what are you doing? Okay, I explain how to bust so easily, and I even made this quick reference image to show you which busts are correlated to which books. And there's a ton of people in the comments that have said, yeah, like this is by far the clearest explanation that I've had of this from all the day one guides. But there is one thing that some people mess up when they're doing this, and that's that they try to bust too fast too many times in a row. So if they know they need to bust twice, for example, they'll hold square to bust once, but then they'll just instantly hold square again before the rotation has finished. And this will actually mess this up because it won't take your input properly. So what you need to do is hold square to get a first bust rotation and wait for it to finish its little rotation and then hold square again, and you'll see it move for a second time, and that means that you've successfully entered twice. So just be patient while you're doing it. You obviously do need to be speedy, but make sure you get a full rotation each time you try and bust. Now, right after that is the planets step, and a lot of people have trouble with this because they get an alignment that they think is correct, but then it doesn't work, and they kind of panic, and they don't know how to fix it from there. Thankfully, Scotty Dogs has found something really interesting about the way that the alignment works. So after you attach Neptune, each planet will start aligned in a southerly direction, facing a south direction. Then when shooting any of the planets from there, you will always have to shoot it either twice to get to the next direction, like southwest or southeast, or 6 times to get to northwest or northeast. And it's always going to be those numbers. So, for example, to work this through with you, if you've got a planet that needs to be lined up with southwest, it's going to start in the south position, and you just need to shoot it twice, clockwise, like I'm doing in the gameplay here. That's going to get it to southwest. Don't go any further, don't go any less. But if that same planet needed to go to northeast, then I would just shoot it 6 times counterclockwise. And it's almost always going to be these numbers. The exception is if you're using a gun that does much more damage, like if it's a tier 3 Pack-a-Punch, it can change these numbers ever so slightly, because if you're using a higher damage weapon, it actually causes the planets to rotate further per shot, which is very annoying. But if you're doing like I'm doing in the gameplay here, and you're using a tier 1 gun, and I think also if you're using a tier 2, then this should be consistent and work for you every time. Doing it this way means you will literally never have problems with this step ever again, unless something goes wrong mid you shooting the planets and you kind of lose track of what's going on. And if that happens, you can always just reset the planets by getting them back south and then starting again from there. Or something that I like to do is for any northeast or northwest planets, if I can't quite figure out which of the positions it needs to be in, like does it need to be just before northwest or just after northwest, I'll always try the after northwest one, so it's slightly more towards north, and I'll see if Thurston accepts that, and then if it doesn't work, then I'll just go back one. And doing it that way, I've never had any problem with this step. It's literally never failed for me. Now, right after that, you're going to have to do the little UFO lockdown sequence with Oscar, and this gives a lot of people a lot of trouble. It's actually one of the harder things to nail in the Easter egg, other than the boss fight, obviously. And part of this is because I think the UFO's hitbox is really buggy, to be honest. Some people also just have trouble with the zombies and Oscar himself during this. And in solo especially, this is a very fiddly task. So to make this easy for you, I tried a bunch of things. I tried the dog, I tried a sentry turret, I tried point turrets, which actually do shoot the UFOs. They're just sadly not consistent enough to rely on them. And I've tried basically everything else as well. And I'd say by far the easiest approach to take here is, yes, you can chuck some point turrets down at the start of the fight just for a little bit of extra insurance. That's fine. But then walk. don't run along the uppermost railing. This will cause Oscar to follow you up there, meaning you give yourself a little bit more leeway to shoot the UFOs as they have a longer distance to cover to get to the portal. Then, as you walk, you're not going to lap Oscar, you just want to be nice and slow so that you never overtake him, and the zombies will therefore mostly be behind you and not traveling in front of your path, and if they are in front of you, you can obviously just shoot them. The exception to the walking here is if you're behind a wall, obviously, you then won't have visibility, so you are then going to want to sprint so you do have eyes on the center. And a word of warning is that Oscar can fire his UFOs through walls at this step, so even if you've gone behind a wall, Oscar doesn't give a damn about that, and he might shoot through it, so that's why sprinting to get vis of the center is so important. Then, when shooting the UFOs, it's really important to aim for the center of them. It's the only reliable way to destroy them, but if you're in co-op, you might want to try leading your shot just the tiniest bit, and that might help the game figure out where you're actually trying to aim, as the netcode here can be a little buggy. I've also had a little bit of success stopping to shoot the UFOs, so the game isn't trying to track my player movement and the movement of the UFOs and matching both of those things up. But that's more of a co-op specific suggestion. Finally, if you're in co-op and you're really still struggling on this, have one of your teammates spawn in with the arrow rocket launcher and just make them blow the whole room up, and that should also help destroy the UFOs. Now, if you can't get to this step at all because you're confused by your Mars declination number only being 3 digits long, the explanation for what you need to do is quite simply, you just add a 0. So let's say your declination number looks like this, and you're like, ah, crap, I'm stuck. In this scenario, I'm just going to turn your 57.5 into 57.05, because that last number is just a single digit, which means it's an 05. So add a 0 the next time you get a 3-digit number, and it should fix it for you. Next, the points system in the map and the lack of plants from ashes mean that getting Pack-a-Punch levels can be pretty expensive, and to do that in combination with all the perks is just pricey. So if you're in a solo match and you happen to go down while you're doing these main quest steps and you lose a bunch of perks, you can, if you want, save and quit immediately once you get back up, and then when you come back, you'll need to rebuy a self-revive, but all your perks will come back, so you have that going for you. It's a little bit of a cheese. Just be wary when you're doing this while completing Easter egg steps, because if you save quit on a round where you've completed a step, you'll have to redo the step. And it can also further mess you up because this game is so damn buggy, so sometimes it will just mess steps up more generally, so it's worth exercising caution when you're doing this. Moreover, things like your papers might have changed, so you might have had directions in one game and then you load back in, you might have different directions in the next game, so you might need to recheck things like that when you return to your match. So with all that stuff done, we then go to Mars, and one of the most fiddly steps in the Easter egg involves this silly little bird dude, and I know a lot of people have been frustrated by this in general. First of all, you don't need fireworks. Like, that's just wrong. You don't need dead wire, you don't need any ammo mod in particular at all, actually. Then, when you're shooting the towers, you don't need to stand next to the windows in the back of the arena where zombies are constantly spawning, because you can actually, as an alternative, stand on top of the platform by the armor wall and shoot the towers from there if you want to. Now, obviously, that's a greater distance to be shooting from, and if you're struggling to hit those little balls on top of the towers, then you could always buy a Shadow SK, which is a wallbind near Wisp T. But also, something I see people get wrong all the time is they get to Mars for the first time, they grab Dr. Thurston's head, they put it into the machine, they hold square, they do all that, and then the bird step instantly starts and they don't realize, and then it auto fails because they just don't do anything and they stand there like a lemon, and then they have to go to the next round to do the step and hold square on the brain to start it. You don't need to do that. You can just install Thurston's head that first time, and then it will start the thing saying, oh, I'm picking up a strange signal, and that's your cue. Go and do the towers immediately, and then you don't have to flip the round. So you'll then get the bird above you, and you'll have to catch the bird, and Thurston will say, make sure it doesn't leave or something along those lines. And this is actual advice, because if you jump and miss too many times and you don't keep the bird attracted to that area by continuously shooting the little tower ball above your head, the bird is eventually just going to fly off. So if you fail a jump, the next time you're about to jump, just quickly look up again and shoot the ball. And that way you'll know that the bird isn't going to kind of get bored and fly away while you're trying to complete your next jump. But what happens if you forget to do this for some reason, or you get distracted by a zombie or something like that, and the bird does fly away? Well, next round, you can just interact with Thurston's brain again, and it will make the sound again, and that will mean that the bird has spawned in again, and you just need to lure it over again, and then catch it that time without failing. Like, lock in, you can do this. So next after that is the pillars, and again, I think I did a pretty good job of explaining how this works in my main quest guide, so I'm not going to re-explain the steps. But one thing that I did want to make crystal clear is that the mystery symbol, which is your blank symbol, can be the first symbol in the sequence or the last symbol in the sequence. And this can make it a little deceptive, because if it's the first symbol, you'll interact with the organ to look at what symbols you've got, and the little oscilloscope there will just stay a static kind of flat line. And that doesn't mean it hasn't started yet. It just means the first symbol is your blank symbol. So keep that in mind. Also, the symbol that your blank corresponds to could be different in different games that you play. So on my graphic here, the reason I wrote example of my blank symbol is that that's just one of the potential blank symbols, but you can get other symbols that are represented by your blank. And the way you tell whether this is the case or not is you just match up the other 4 symbols, and then you know the remaining symbol that doesn't correspond to anything on the organ has to be the blank symbol. Now, a nice failsafe for this step is that if you get the order wrong, it's actually not immediately over, because it will pop up red when you've held square on the pillar, but it will still give you another 2 tries to get it right. And it is on a time limit, so you'll have to be very fast here, but you might be able to mix up and then get a lucky guess in or something and finish off your sequence. And this also means that you can actually solve this just purely by trial and error if you really want to, because you'll have the same symbols every single round that you retry this. But if you save quit your game, the order of the symbols will change, so you will need to recheck in that instance. Now, before going to boss, there's a bit of housekeeping to do on the map. First of all, make sure the wonder weapon is at least double pack-a-punched and ideally triple papped, because we are going to be using that for the fight. Your other weapon should be strong enough to kill zombies, and ideally high rarity and double papped, I would say, ideally. But for which weapon that should actually be, I'm going to give you those recommendations in a second once we're sort of talking over the boss footage. So just wait a sec for that. And it should also have an ammo mod on it that is either light mend, maybe, just for some survivability, or something that is going to help you kill groups of zombies a bit more easily, such as fireworks. Your vital perks are Jug, Stam, Double Tap Speed, Vulture Aid, and more on those in a moment. And lastly, and very importantly, I recommend going to the Pack-a-Punch room and throwing a C4 exactly where I'm throwing it in the gameplay here. It can be a bit fiddly, so it doesn't hurt to throw multiple C4 just to guarantee this, but then we're not going to activate that C4 until later. Then for equipment, there are kind of 2 schools of thought here. I know some people like stims, but I'm actually a stims hater. I'm going to be straight up with you. I just think that the Casimirs are so much more effective in this fight for making sure that you can be greedy with your damage. You might not know what I mean by that, but once we get to the boss fight section, it's going to become very clear. So Casimirs are always going to be my preference, but if you can't craft them for some reason, or you're trying to speedrun, or I don't know, something like that, then yes, stims are going to mean that you can heal up quickly or you can overheal, but I would still take Casimirs over them every single time. Also, never go into the boss fight during a Ravager round. It's a really bad idea. It's going to make the fight 10 times harder for no reason, because meteorites will be falling on your head for the entire fight. So just don't do that. Okay, so I said I would come back to augments at the very beginning of the video. I'm going to do that now. So first of all, turtle shell as an option here can be okay. It's not going to be the absolute biggest game changer in the world in my experience, but it is going to be nice when you are crafting on the head to fire the lasers. Like, you know, you have to do that to beam the boss initially. That step requires you to have your back exposed for like 10 seconds. And obviously with turtle shell, you can just prevent yourself from taking damage from behind. So that can be quite nice. Also, in the fight, having an extra plate in reserve is really nice, so I'd recommend putting that on Mule Kick. Then on Stamina Up, Guns Up is like my favorite augment in the game. It means you can keep your gun up while sprinting. That's delicious for the boss fight, highly recommend. Also, Hard Target is another good one on Stamina Up, where your incoming projectile damage is reduced while sprinting. Then on Wisp T, you definitely don't need the zombie system Sitter minor augment anymore, so you could swap it out to haste, which just means that your Wisp Tea has a shorter cooldown before it's summoned. And on PhD, it's now a really good idea to use Environmentalist, which makes you immune to environmental damage while sliding. And I would use that in combination with Tribologist, so that's both your minor augments used up there. And Tribologist obviously increases your slide distance. And that's going to mean that when you get to the electric shocking part of the boss fight, which is phase 4, you can slide through the edges of that electricity and you're not going to take damage, which is enormous. It makes your survivability so much better. And not only that, but it's also going to help you when those toxic zombies spawn in and they leave the kind of toxic puddles. You can slide through the sort of edges of those. And then for double tap, these probably make the most difference out of all the augments. So if you're choosing a bullet weapon for the fight, not the wonder weapon, then you've sort of got two things to consider. There's the slightly less good double standard, which means that you do more damage for non-crits. So that might help you break the armor faster. But my preference here, and the thing that I'd recommend, whether or not you're using a bullet gun actually, is double impact, where successive hits on a single target do bonus damage. And this will mean that so long as you're not shooting zombies in between shooting the boss, you're going to do a ton of damage to the boss whether or not it's got its armor up. I cannot stress enough how big a difference I feel like this one makes, so I really strongly recommend it. Double impact. Then on Death Perception, I think I already mentioned this, but make sure you've got Critical Eye on, where body shots with bullet weapons have a chance to deal critical damage, and that's obviously relevant if you're using the Nova line. And you'll want to use Dead Break, which increases damage to armor pieces. So that's a lot of augment suggestions. What are the actual strats in play here? Well, first let's talk about the cheese, and then let's talk about the kind of alternative if you don't want to do the cheese. Because the cheese might get patched, but it also might not. So if you want to do the cheese, do it as soon as possible, but still got a bunch of tips for you if it does end up getting nerfed a little bit doing that strat. So to cheese, you're going to use Frenzied Guard with Frenzy Fire and Extension. And the way I'd recommend doing it is during the first phase of the fight, when it's the skull in the air, you just do it normally. That's fine. And then at the start of the second phase, you are going to pop your Frenzied Guard and you are going to shoot the boss with infinite ammo on your wonder weapon. Now, this might make it look really easy, but there is some tech to make it work more reliably. So first of all, you need your wonder weapon to actually track to the boss. Like if any of those UFOs go to other zombies instead of shooting the boss, it's going to mess up the way the ammo regenerates. So make sure you've got a clear line of sight to the boss when you pop your Frenzied. This means what I like to do is I like to throw a Casimir at the beginning just before I Frenzied Guard. And that helps make sure that all the zombies are out of the way so I can just focus the boss really, really easily. And then you can go in for round 2 once you've got your next charge. Also, once your Frenzied Guard finishes, there'll still be a bunch of UFOs on the boss, and this means that you'll get continuous ammo regeneration faster than normal for a short period. So don't stop spamming once the Frenzied Guard ends. You want to keep making use of all that extra ammo gen that you're going to have and keep spamming the boss there, and you'll find that the health bar keeps melting and you'll finish the phase very fast. So that's phase 2 done. Then for phase 3, you can do the exact same thing if you blow up those C4s that we planted earlier to spawn in a full power. And you can then just use Frenzied Guard again, exactly like we just did. Then you're going to get to the 4th phase, and the game's going to give you a max, which is lovely. And then you can use a Power Keg Gobblegum here, if you've got one, to refresh your Frenzied Guard once again. Alternatively though, if you don't have a Power Keg, I'd recommend either trying to do phase 2 without using Frenzied Guard, so you can just use regular Frenzied phase 3, and then the C4 Frenzied on phase 4, or you can manually build your Frenzied Guard charge up again by killing zombies during phase 2 or 3, and then save your free full power for phase 4. So that's the Frenzied strat. Works amazingly in solo, amazingly in co-op, it's very, very good. But let's say Treyarch patches it, right? Then what? Well, luckily for you, I have a strat here that is basically as good as the cheese, and it requires no cheese. Like, this is just a plain sandwich. There's nothing in it, but it still just destroys the boss. It's insane. So the weapon of choice is going to be the M10 Breacher that I mentioned at the start of the video. And this isn't the only gun that's good. You could also use the Jaeger, which I've got a build guide for in the description and in the corner of the screen right now. And that'll show my attachments and getting it akimbo and the prestige attachment and all that stuff. And the nice thing about the Jaeger is that it's on the wall as well. So you can purchase that regardless of whether or not you spawn in with it, just like the Nova line. But even so, my preference is still to use the M10 Breacher. So let's go through the whole boss fight now with the assumption that you've got the Breacher in hand. And we'll talk through all the phases and give you tips for the whole thing and show you how to use the Breacher in the most effective manner. So for the first phase of the fight, you're just killing zombies. Really straightforward, and my preference for this is you're going to stand on the top platform and basically just spawn kill the zombies and run in kind of figure eights or little zigzags up there. And you can obviously leave at any time if you need to, but because you have quite concentrated zombie spawns, it just makes this part of the fight really, really straightforward. Now, you will be being attacked by the laser up there. The good news is you can actually just run through the laser and you're not going to take like 500 damage or something. It doesn't do that much to you if you're only in it for a second. So you should be fine just jumping back and forth and trying to dodge the laser while killing zombies, or just kind of getting clipped by it, but still just moving through. Then you're going to also have the toxic zombies spawning in, and those are going to cause little sort of AoE toxic puddles on the floor that you need to be careful of. And you'll also have meteors that will rain down on you here, and those can sort of lock off sections of this upper area. And you'll also have the gas that will spawn in at some points, right? So in any of those scenarios, if the gas is in and you're worried about how much space you have up top because the meteors have caused big fiery patches on the ground or what have you, you can just go to the middle platform and run around there for a little bit to wait for all of this stuff to clear, and then you can go back to doing what you were doing. And that includes during the gas, by the way. A lot of people don't realize that that middle platform is actually safe while the gas is in, so you can always use it as a getaway if your preferred area is burning or toxic or being lasered too much or what have you. So then you're going to get into phase 2, and we still aren't going to quite use our bullet weapon just yet. My preference here is to still break the armor with the wonder weapon. I just think that it's a nice hands-off approach where you can focus on making sure that you're not getting trapped by zombies that are spawning in. And at the start of a phase, when it's a fresh spawn, it's always going to be a little bit more chaotic, I would say. So having something that is going to be hands-free at this stage is just really nice. So fire your UFOs into the boss and those will eat up its armor. And then once the armor is broken, it's going to be breacher time. And like I said before, we're using double impact here. And so you need to make sure that you're successively hitting the boss, not just firing 1 or 2 shots and then shooting the zombies. Like, keep that damage on the boss wherever you can. For movement, we're going to be on the top platform, and then we're going to jump down to the middle platform to kind of kite the boss through the middle of the arena. We're then going to go back to the top platform, and you've got 2 choices for how to do this. You can either go from middle platform and then do a kind of low gravity jump to one of the staircases on either side, and then bring the boss up into the middle, and then jump back to the middle platform, and you'll see the boss kind of go through the mantle animation to try and get back to you, which gives you some great opportunities to shoot it. Or when you're on middle platform, you can actually jump right next to Thurston's head and mantle up the side of Thurston's head, and that's going to cause the boss to do its mantle animation back up to that top platform. And that again gives you just a couple of extra seconds. But it's totally fine to do it either way. Jumping to the stairs or jumping to Thurston's head are both viable options. But we're going to maintain this loop through this entire phase, phase 2. And like I said before, we can use a Frenzied Guard here as well, because we're going to get our Frenzied Guard back in phase 3 using that C4. So while you're in your Frenzied, spam like hell and make sure that you're getting those successive hits on the boss, and you're going to chunk it in an unreal way. You're going to do so much damage. And for you, if the part of the fight that is more scary is when the boss's armor isn't broken, then you could Frenzy during the wonder weapon damage phase, or if the part of the fight that's harder is shooting with the breacher, then I would frenzied during the breacher phase. So that'll be phase 2. You'll get the boss dead, and then in phase 3, we're going to use that C4 to get our field upgrade back, and we're going to basically do the exact same thing. The main difference in this part of the fight is that the boulders are bigger, but that's actually good news for you, because they're actually going to be easier to dodge, and so you can just maintain the strat that I've already explained for phase 2, and it will still continue to work just fine in phase 3. There's also a slam attack introduced in phase 3, and for this, you need to be airborne when the slam hits in order to dodge it. So that counts for even if you're already on a higher elevation than the boss, Doesn't matter, you still need to jump. But other than that, everything is the same for the way that we're going to execute this. Then you're going to get into phase 4. You're going to prepare to grab the new power-up, but there's actually some secret, no-nonsense technology that you can use here to make your life a little easier, which is that you can pop a temporal before you grab the power-up, and that will cause it to last for even longer. But you really don't need to do this. I'd say that it's more important to have a power keg available, because that's going to give you your free full power. And if you don't have a power keg, then I would say, okay, you can afford to not use your C4 for the free full power-up from the little side Easter egg in phase 3, and instead just do that in phase 4. Now, in terms of how our strategy is going to change here, you basically need to just have the mindset that if you take ages to kill the boss in phase 4, that purple lightning is going to be everywhere. It's going to ruin the arena for you. You're going to be trying to environmentalist PhD slide through it all the time, which is going to help prevent you take damage, but it's also just going to be fiddly and annoying, and it's really not optimal. So the mindset you need to be in is, I'm going to speedrun this round. I'm going to speedrun with the M10 Breacher, and we're going to take the boss out really damn fast. So the way I do this is I pop my Frenzied. I then pull that wonder weapon out, and I try and break the armor as fast as possible. I have no other real focuses at this point. I just want that armor broken. Then as soon as that armor is broken, my mind is going into, okay, I've got 2 Casimirs available, and if I have a cashback, then yes, I could have more. But let's say that you just have the 2. You need to get a ton of successive damage off on the boss during those Casimirs. And that means, let's say you've thrown a Cas, and the boss is winding up to throw a purple rock at you. You might want to face check that purple rock in that moment, just to get a couple of extra successive shots off, because those shots could do 10, 15, or 20% of the boss's health bar just by being greedy. Then similarly, the boss is chasing you down and is walking towards you and it's going to swipe you. You might still want to be getting a bit greedy, getting those shots off on the boss, because if you give it the opportunity to throw more and more and more purple rocks, that's what's going to start killing you. It's not going to be at the beginning of the phase when the boss has hardly done anything. It's actually easier at that part of the fight. So that's Frenzied for armor, and then it's Cas 1 and Cas 2 for basically getting the boss to 0 HP. It's popping a cashback if you don't manage to do that, and then if you still don't manage to do that, then it's just doing the kiting that we were doing before, jumping from top to middle platform to top to middle platform, and being quite aggressive with the boss here to chunk it and take it down really fast. But if you're still having trouble, and I know this is a really difficult fight, then there's a video linked on screen right now, which is a live comm of me walking through the entire boss phase in great detail. And that's going to mean that you can see all this happening in real time, which might just be an easier way for you to ingest the information. So if this video has been useful, drop a like, maybe consider subscribing, and then click through, and I'll see you there in that boss commentary.